We Have Just Begun gives a recount of one of the deadliest race riots that occurred in Elaine, the Elaine race riot, and is centered in Arkansas and around farmers who wanted to unionize and plan to strike to find competitive pricing and control over their cotton crop. And you have these firsthand accounts spoken through others in this community, and you have also audio that was secured from that time. And I think that that made it very powerful to see the various sides, people from the community and people who also maybe benefited directly from this event. This riot was not something that was on my radar, and I'm always very appreciative to find out more things about the African American experience that are not readily televised or readily taught, especially in a time now where critical race theory is upon us and people are going out of their way to remove the history of what has been done to Black people from the schools, probably to protect their own sense of guilt for doing it or being tied or for benefiting from ancestors who have done it, or just to clean the slate of what the horrors that people will go through. But the thing about these horrors is people are still affected from it today. And what I really liked about this documentary is that it showed how people who are directly affected by this event are still dealing with it today, on the end of those who were negatively affected and on the end of those who were positively affected. The true reasoning behind this race riot, even though it was advertised as being a race riot and needing to subdue the Negro at the time, was because they wanted land distribution, and they wanted to have a sense of control, which is usually the reason for anything that has been extremely deadly within our culture. If you think of the any of the major issues that have taken place, like with Black Wall Street or Seneca Village, or any of these moments where it seemed like you have Black people thriving within their space and environments, there's almost this fear that allowing them to thrive will be a deterrent to the white majority. What I did learn about this that was interesting is this became critical for the NAACP, because when this went to trial, it did determine how they can go up against the court system to fight for the rights of Blacks. Because all of it was an effort to suppress the acquirement of land and the acquirement of wealth and independence for the Black farmers at the time. Interview took a very interesting turn when speaking to a man who had benefited directly from this event and from that acquirement of land. He almost at a time seemed very interested in the history of it all, prideful about the history of it all, but then turned to discomfort when it came down to the questions of, well, do you feel like this was fair? You know, but I think his non-answers said a lot. And then they show the present effects of this land retribution for the people who still live within this area, who feel like they have no control over how the surrounding farmlands are affecting them, whether it be the pesticide spraying and things like that, which it could be inherently affecting their health. And this is just such a call of action for me for acknowledgement of this riot and the real reason behind what happened on this land and what happened to these people who are not documented as passing, and what just happened in this space. And I just appreciated that they took the time to actually put this together to bring light to it. And I do hope this documentary is seen by so many people, because I just think people just need to know what's happening in the world.
We've just begun. Um, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was really, really detailed. I thought it was really, really informative. And I liked how they presented it, with starting from the very beginning and going through the events with descendants and with as much like historical information and pictures from the time, and slowly working forwards to really show how like the current state of race relations and the current state of everything was impacted by everything that happened years and years and years ago. And so I really, like I said, I really loved how it was presented. I really loved how slow they kind of took it in really explaining the circumstances, what was happening, what was being reported versus what other, like, outside of news outlets and things like that, like what was actually happening, and really trying to get across the actual events and what truly happened, not just what was reported, not just, what maybe you were taught in history class or anything like that. The true events. And I really appreciated that. I really, really enjoyed that. I think it's really important. I think that we can't shy away from history. We can't shy away from what actually happened. You have to be able to admit those things and figure out a way forward. And this, like I said, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a great movie to really explain something that, like, honestly, I don't even remember in history class. I don't even remember, it being talked about through any of my history classes. And I think that that's so important because, like I said, you can't just gloss over the ugly parts of history. You really do have to look at all of them, especially if they are still affecting your, current day relations and current situations. And I thought it was wonderful.
We Have Just Begun is horrifying, it's illuminating, and it's utterly vital. The Elaine race riot is not something I'd heard of before, but it's amazing how crucial it was in shaping American history. One of the things that's so fascinating about the film is that by diving deep into like the land and its history, you don't just excavate the long story of racism, but also these really amazing stories of resistance and collective action. The way Black people were organising um, to get better treatment for their labour. Um, you know, just trying to take control of their work and cut out the white exploitation and just go straight directly to our own market. Like that's fascinating. And it shows that this resistance has always been happening. And then the way that the white ruling class responded to this by generating these moral panics to try and escalate violence in response is utterly horrible, but also has like terrifying resonances with lots of stuff going on today. So you see like the long roots, not just of these struggles, but of the methods for trying to suppress them. Ultimately, it's this I think is most interesting about it because it's also the most tragic aspect of the documentary. The Elaine Rice riot and the events surrounding it. Represent a moment in time that's loaded with revolutionary potential. Where Black people are starting to build, a society of real equality and fairness that they could participate fully in. But it was quashed, by ruthless violence by white capitalists who just couldn't stand the thought of Black people, taking control of their own lives and their own labour, and cutting them out of the capitalist process. And it's this that's really stained and shaped the entire history of the West. And results from, and it's also what's caused, the current Black residents of Elaine having it so bad that they're worse off than their ancestors were a century ago. So it's a very difficult, upsetting, but wholly necessary and endearing watch.
We have just begun. This is such a deeply important piece in trying to uncover a legacy of exploitation, essentially, and how it's always attempted to be veiled. So it's wonderful to do an honest and difficult unveiling in this struggle for autonomy, in starting out with the race riots in Elaine, Arkansas. I thought it was really powerful cinematography throughout in capturing the land, the landscape, this environment that holds this painful history in its soil, and what still remains. I also thought that the uses of images and archives, newspaper, primary sources from the time really helped to capture this history visually. Um, Great variety of subjects, of descendants, of people who were there, eyewitnesses, to comment on this and how this has affected them, but also still permeates today, as we see still the same violence against Black people. Um, I thought the soundscape was really well designed as well. It just interwove throughout in a emotional and impactful way, and I thought this was a really important piece, and I hope it gets out there to the world as much as possible.
This was such an expertly produced documentary and just a thorough telling of most depressingly rich history of uh, of slavery. And it's depressing, of course, because not only should things have never been that way, they are to a extent, as we learned through watching this, still like that. Just the persistence of slavery and indentured servitude is just horrific, really. So this documentary, just does a good job of just telling the facts and only the facts, and just doing it in an interesting and compelling way. There's plenty of historic footage and stills treated with parallax and other effects to make things, feel modernized and vintage at the same time. So I thought that was just a cool treatment of the footage. Um, it's really well edited in that regard, and as well as that, just the pacing and how much information is presented so succinctly. It's they just really do a fantastic job presenting that information, and the subject matter is important. And unfortunately evergreen. So, for that reason alone, I'm glad this piece exists. Again, just if for no other reason than just to help spread more awareness and knowledge about the history of slavery in America, and to hopefully, to some degree, help combat the current uprising of fascism and unfettered racism that we see in the media almost every day now. So, just, great work on this one. It's a really important one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
We have just begun. This is a very powerful documentary. The story talks about the Elaine massacre occurred in 1919. The massacre has been buried for over 100 years now, and it is indeed a very difficult event to remember when there was this uprising, this fight between Black American people, Black African American people, and white people that resulted in the death of one police officer for white people, and then the army was ordered, the police was ordered to just put things back in place again, and this results in dozens of African American being killed. I think is a very powerful documentary, shining a light on a very important event for the African American history, but also for the world history also because this event addresses the problem of racism in USA, but also at the same time the problem of racism throughout the whole world. And I think the film was very powerful, very historically accurate, super accurate, because there was a lot of information that hasn't been shared in the past and now is finally being shared. And at the same time, the way the story is told, the dialogues, the interviews, the B-roll are all very, very deep and meaningful. And I think the cinematography and the direction are great in this film. They really, really help in keeping the viewer, keeping the audience there, glued to the screen from start to finish. Because I think overall this is an important movie. It deserves to be watched, but at the same time is also very, very well shot and very well told. Congratulations, great job.
We Have Just Begun explores this side of history that is not taught in American public schools. It is something that you have to seek out to find this information because it looks so bad for our nation, and it's just not taught. This horrible side of after the Civil War, we're taught that we had Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement, and then everything was fine, which is obviously not the case. We have horrific instances like this Elaine massacre, basically, that we are not taught, and it is horrific. It is a huge just slaughter that we're not taught about. And so to bring awareness to that is really important, and this documentary does an amazing job of doing that. And also showing the lasting impact of something like this, even over a century later, talking about how this area of the country is now still one of the least livable places, one of the poorest, how racism is still running rampant over a century after this massacre occurred. And so the title of this documentary is still very, very relevant. We have just begun. The fight is still happening for equal rights, for justice, basically, for this massacre. So we really have just begun in this fight for civil rights, especially in this area of the country. I thought that the way that this documentary brought these historical events back to life was really, really cool and really effective. They used reenactments, like modern footage of reenactments. They used old photographs, and behind the old photographs, they used sound effects and music that really brought those photographs back to life and made it feel like we were in that moment. So they did a great job of just immersing the audience in this history, and everyone that they had speak, just seeing how young these people are talking about these historical events that were not very long ago, just seeing how young these people are that are talking about these events, being direct descendants, just really makes you think and realize that these horrific crimes against African Americans were, just a few lifetimes away, not even 2 lifetimes away, and that is still a very relevant problem. So yeah, I enjoyed this documentary a lot. I learned a lot about these historical events that were not taught to me in school, and I think that's very important for people to see. So I think this is a really important film.